Good morning, Friday, December 23rd. Got a big dump of snow last night. I don't know if I'm going to be going anywhere today or not. It's probably my messages telling me that we're not having a dinner tonight. But I just got up. It's 10 a.m. Fire going nice here today. Kept it going overnight because, like I said, we got a big dump of snow last night. And it's pretty cold today. There we go. So this morning I was going to continue reading the book I've been reading online here. Probably do an hour today to get some pages behind me. Maybe I'll have a smoke and see if anybody's going to gather here today. I got my Mr. Potato Head look going today. Shaved my head last night, grabbed a little shave or whatever. All right. And without further ado, I'll get into the part 3 of the series that I'm doing here. And I'm currently on chapter 2, page 29 of Kevin Weeks' book, Brutal. The untold story of his life inside Whitey Bulger's Irish mob. Marriage and the Triple O's, 1978 to 82. On Christmas Day, 1978, at her parents' house on East 4th Street in South Boston, I gave Pam a ring. It was a nice ring. It cost me around $3,000. I had no problem paying for the ring since I was making some money by then. I put the ring in a box and tried to surprise her with it. But like most women, she probably knew exactly when and what she was getting or going to get. A year and a half later, on April 26, 1980, we got married at the gate of Heaven Church in South Boston. Pam planned the big wedding with 18 people in the wedding party, and I just agreed with everything she said. She looked absolutely stunning. It took her longer to walk down the aisle of the church than for us to say the vows. As soon as the priest finished, everyone clapped loudly, and I kissed the beautiful bride. I'd always liked Pam's terrific family, which includes her 6 sisters, 3 older sisters, Paula, Sue, and Karen, and 3 younger sisters, Marie, Michelle, and Christine. What a handful, eh? But you had to pay her poor father, Rocky, or you had to pity him. Her poor father, Rocky, with 7 daughters and only 1 bathroom. Rocky was a great guy, one of the gentlest men I ever met, and a loving father who was proud of all of his daughters. But 3 years before we got married, Pam's mother, Marie, died at age 47. At age 47 from lung cancer. Marie was a beautiful woman who looked like Veronica Lake. When Marie got sick, Pam quit her job and took amazing care of her, never leaving her mother's side while she was dying. First coffee of the day there, but that's the kind of person Pam has always been, loyal and loving. The whole Cavallari family has always been a warm, emotional, and outgoing family, very different from mine. While my brothers and sisters are loyal to one another, we're not demonstrative like Pam's family. We all have six senses of humor, sort of a black humor that makes us laugh at things most people would not find funny. Like if one of us fell down the stairs, an ordinary family might run to help him, but my brothers and sisters would fall over each other laughing hysterically. Same thing if one of us got a hand caught in the door, another person might say, "Oh my God, are you all right?" and race over to help. Not our group. We'd be convulsed in laughter. It doesn't mean we're cold-hearted or unloving. It's just this weird way of looking at things we all share. Tell you, it's hard to. I stumble over my words sometimes. It's Joe Biden-esque almost. It's just this weird way of looking at things we all share, and it's completely different from the way Pam's family would respond to the same event. Even today, though Pam is sadly no longer in my life, I will keep in touch with her family and have always been grateful for how supportive they are of our boys. At the wedding, Billy Connell was my best man. Billy and I had known each other since we were kids growing up in the old Colony Project and had lived together on the West 3rd Street before Pam and I got married. We'd had some fun times decorating that apartment. One night around 4 a.m., Billy, Pam, and I walked into an all-night Howard Johnson's restaurant in Andrew Square, picked up a 75-pound plant, and walked out with it. When a waitress asked us what we were doing, I told her in a serious, no-nonsense type tone that we were tree surgeons. She nodded just as seriously as we carefully set the plant in the back of Pam's father's Suburban and drove off. My first parlor set came from the hotel part of the same restaurant a few weeks later. That time around 2 in the afternoon, another friend and I picked up a couch and love seat like we knew what we were doing and threw them in the back of the Suburban. No one paid any attention to us. I learned a good lesson decorating that apartment. Nobody will think anything is wrong if you do it calmly. It's too obvious to be a crime. That particular lesson turned out to be useful. The guest list for the wedding included the older guys I was now spending more time with. Jimmy Bulger and Steve Fleming sat at a table with Kevin O'Neill, another owner of the Triple O's, Freddie Weichel, a friend of mine, and Johnny Pretzi, a friend who trained me late in my boxing career. I made sure the wedding photographer understood that there would be no pictures taken of that table. Everybody acted like gentlemen and had a great time. Pam's and my song was Always and Forever by Heatwave, and our disc jockey was Joey Cunningham. It was a beautiful April afternoon and perfectly happy occasion. My new wife and I left 2 days later for a week in Disney World, where we stayed at the Contemporary Hotel. My honeymoon, I jumped on my motorbike and rode to Winnipeg with a club. My wife mentioned that the other day to me, that we never even had a honeymoon. Like she was mad or cared about it. That was when I was sending her $1,000. But from the time Pam and I got engaged, I had been spending more hours at Triple O's, the rowdy, popular South Boston watering hole on West Broadway, named for and owned by the three O'Neill brothers, Jackie, Kevin, and Billy. I'd left Flicks and gone to work. Yeah, I'd left Flicks and gone to work there, along with some of my friends, bringing up ice and beer, keeping the ice stocked. I was also working for the Massachusetts Bay Transit Authority from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. at a job my brother Jack got me, laying track. It was simple but hard work, and I enjoyed the physical labor. Even though I wasn't making great money there, I was getting all the benefits. But on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, I was working at Triple O's, a dimly lit, smoke-filled place with booths for eating, as well as a long bar with stools. Local South Boston artists covered the walls with colorful cartoon drawings of Disney scenes and the Seven Dwarfs. And some caricatures of Triple O regulars, bartenders, ports, shots, and waitresses served hamburgers and steak tips, along with cold sandwiches like ham and cheese. A small dance floor with a jukebox occupied a section of the bar. On weekends, a DJ or sometimes a live band came in. The place could hold over 150 people and was always busy, especially so on my nights. As soon as Gillette switched shifts at 4:30 in the afternoon, the place got packed. The corporate headquarters and factory for all the Gillette personnel grooming products was right behind the Triple O's. At 9 p.m., the Gillette people would filter out to go home and the locals would come in. There were all kinds of Jesus. Yeah, just not available right now, man. Now, back to where I was. At 9 p.m., the Gillette people would filter out to go home and the locals would come in. There were all kinds of women there from ages 18 to 60, looking to meet guys or spend the night with a date or just have a good time with friends. Southie girls were girls always dressed up and looked great, pretty much staying in their own group, not mingling much with girls from other neighborhoods such as Dorchester. Kevin O'Neill was about 8 years older than me and a businessman, good at making money. He was a large guy, around 6'4" and 320 pounds, with big hands and salt and pepper hair. An outgoing guy. He liked to laugh and was a good friend of Jimmy's. In 1981, when Kevin got married, I stood up for him at his wedding. His brother Billy, who I'd met at the South Boston courthouse when we'd each been brought up on charges of assaulting a black person, was 2 years younger and a lot smaller than Kevin at 5'9", 156 pounds, and ripped. It was Billy who had suggested I come to work at Triple O's. The two of us got along great and often worked the door together. But despite the clusters of girls looking to meet guys and the Gillette workers, Triple O's was a rough place where the neighborhood guys hung out, drank, and settled scores. The drinking age was 18 then, so I knew most of the younger crowd there fights. So I knew most of the younger crowd there. Fights broke out almost every night, especially on the nights I worked. Lots of these fights were the breeding grounds for grudges that later resulted in killings, perpetrated by patients with Irish Alzheimer's, a disease where everything is forgotten except a grudge. Most often it was a fist fight that spun out of control, but other times people would use baseball bats, knives, or serious weapons. My rapport with Jimmy began to form soon after I started working there, hired along with a bunch of my friends to help out on St. Patrick's Day, the rowdiest night of the year at Triple O's. I was bringing in the beer and ice from downstairs when a fight broke out. There were 8 guys working the door that night, 7 of them whom were my friends, and within seconds it was full-blown free-for-all. All my friends were busy inside and outside trying to take care of things. As soon as I got back upstairs, I jumped over the bar to help my friends and knocked out a couple of the worst troublemakers. Jimmy and Kevin O'Neill were standing there watching the whole scene. A week later, Kevin asked if I would work the door for $25 a night plus 10% of the tips of the waitresses and bartenders. I accepted. Jimmy came in a night or two over the weekends, always quiet, reserved, and polite, dressed neatly, usually in dungarees, cowboy boots, and a leather jacket. Most nights he spent talking with Kevin O'Neill, but sometimes he came in with Steve Flemmy, the partner he teamed up with in the early 1970s. Often they were in suits, having just gone out on a date for dinner with the girls they brought into Triple O's. Jimmy would always say, "Hi, how you doing?" when he passed by me at the door. He never sat at the bar, but stood in his customary spot at the end of the bar, his back against the wall, not anxious to attract attention. Over time, he engaged me more and more in conversation and got to know me better. He was aware of all the fights I was in, of the people who got hurt bad and had to go to the hospital. But when the two of us talked, it was never about crime. Rather, he would tell me to read, to work hard, and to stay out of trouble and away from alcohol. Avoiding alcohol was never a problem for me since I wasn't a big drinker. I think he liked the fact that I didn't have any major bad habits. He also liked that I kept in good shape, still running out nearly every day, working out regularly at the gym and in my house, and occasionally boxing. Some nights, Jimmy, who was around 45 then, would show up with good-looking women or young girls, anywhere from ages 18 to 40. He never came in with 2 women. He shared 2 different homes with Teresa Stanley, who was about 10 years younger than him, or Kathy Gregg, who was 27 years younger than him. He wasn't much of a drinker and would spend the night nursing a vodka tonic or the same beer that sat in front of him all evening. For the most part, people kept a respectful distance and would walk by, nod, and keep on going. Rarely, if ever, invited over. Plenty of guys had no idea who he was, which was how he preferred it. The last thing Jimmy wanted was for everyone to recognize his face. I'm sure everybody, you would think, in Boston would know Jimmy. James Whitey Bulger. So over a period of 3 years from 75 to 1978, I could see that he was watching how I conducted myself in fights and how I handled the door. There was no doubt I had a temper and was quick to react when someone bothered me. But for the most part, I remained pretty easygoing. My objective at the door, however, was simple: stop trouble before it came in. It was important to quickly recognize people who would become a belligerent. Maybe I'd had problems with them before, in which case I wouldn't let them in again. Even though they might be mad when I turned them away, eventually they would leave. I wasn't nasty, but I would explain calmly that they couldn't come in if they were drunk or had been barred. I also kept them out if they had phony IDs or if I just didn't like their demeanor and could sense they were going to be trouble. I made sure I was never a bully and never hit people just to hit them. But sometimes when people deserved it, I hit them and I enjoyed it. Still, the only time I hit anyone was if they hit me first hit hit or bothered someone else. Often strangers or out-of-towners who I'd never seen before would come in and start something. Then I had to, then I had no choice but to get into the middle of the fight to stop it. I didn't think about it. I just did it. My job. Even though some nights I was able to talk to people and calm them down, most often I ended up physically throwing out the troublemaker. I tried to side with the regular customers since they were the ones spending money and toss out the person who had come in for the first time. Yeah. One time I was at the door with another bouncer when a couple of brothers started a fight with us, just a drunken barroom thing. We had taken the fight outside when a third guy jumped out of a car and came running at us with a hatchet. Furious, I grabbed an aluminum baseball bat back inside behind the door and defended myself, slugging him with it. As he went down, he dropped the hatchet and I picked it up, determined to give it back to him, but in my own special way. A minute later, he took off and I ran after him with the hatchet in my hand. Catching up with him at Cardinal Cushing High School, still angry at his attacking me, I planted his weapon in his shoulder blade and watched as his shirt turned red with blood. He ran away, the handle of the hatchet flopping up and down in the wind. I'd never seen the guy before and never saw him again, but I was certain he ended up in the emergency room trying to explain the huge wound in his back. Wow. Some nights I bartended and bounced. Before we were married, I brought in Pam, who started out as a waitress and then filled in at the bar. She made a terrific bartender, but because she was so beautiful, guys were always trying to hit on her. Knowing my temper, Pam never wanted me to get into fights, so she wouldn't tell me if someone grabbed her. But still, whenever I saw anything, I ended up knocking the guys out, breaking their jaws and teeth, and or splitting their faces open. It wasn't good for business to have her behind the bar and me at the door. Once she got pregnant with our first son, she stopped working. Working on the Boston subway system and still bouncing, I wasn't making a lot of money, but I could see that Jimmy was getting more comfortable with me and was bringing me around to his world. Bringing me around to his world slowly and cautiously, having me meet the people in his circle, all the people he dealt with. I I understood from the beginning that he wasn't the kind of person who took a shine to someone overnight, that he would never just jump into something. If he was going to work with someone, he wanted to know exactly what he was getting before he moved even a small step forward. Oh, not one freaking person today. Eh? That's unbelievable. Why wouldn't this just go on as a live stream for anybody to watch? Tell ya, YouTube. Okay, but I'm going to continue on. Just I'm going to take a coffee break. But as he talked to me a bit more, this is getting into it now. But as he talked to me a bit more each night, he was taking pains to get to know me better. One afternoon in '78, right after he told Nikki Femia, one of his associates who was doing coke and getting out of hand, to go his own way, he asked me to get in the car with him and drive around. From then on, the two of us rode around more and more, often in his blue Chevy Malibu or Ford sedan, often for a couple of hours after I got off work at the T and before I started at Triple O's. His cars were always fast cars, never registered to him, and had police scanners and toggle switches for the lights, so the interior light wouldn't go on. But there were nondescript and never stood out. Police scanners were pretty much standard operating procedure for most cars, but Jimmy didn't listen to the Boston police. Mostly he listened to the FBI, of course, the DEA, and the state police signals. One night when I was working at Triple O's, Jimmy suggested I take a drive with him and another guy. Immediately I got a little nervous and began to wonder if I had done something wrong. The three of us had been driving around for a half hour or so when Jimmy pulled over to pick up a kid in his early 20s at a bar on East Broadway. When the kid got into the back seat with me, I still didn't know what was going on. I knew I'd been in a lot of fights. Maybe I'd hit the wrong person. Then Jimmy started yelling at the kid as supposedly smacking his niece and pulled over to the park at M and 3rd Streets. Then I understood what was happening. And it had nothing to do with me. Right away I saw that the kid had a buck knife in a sheath, which he tried to cover up, but Jimmy turned around, saw the knife, grabbed it off him, and slashed him across the throat with it. Using the blunt side, Jimmy looked at me, and I got into it, punching the kid, busting his nose, and knocking out his teeth. Blood poured out of his nose and mouth. Then Jimmy reached into the kid's back pocket and pulled out a police-type leather sap. As he beat the kid with the sap, he managed to hit me as much as he was hitting the kid. My hand swelled right up, and I didn't notice it until afterwards. The kid ended up crouched in a fetal position on the floor of the back seat. Jimmy then drove back to the bar on East Broadway and dumped him out in front of the bar. So, Jesus, I gotta read better than this. Jimmy then drove back to the bar on East Broadway and dumped him out in front of the bar so everyone could see what happened. to him, and God, I'm losing it today. After the kid stumbled into the bar, his friends came storming out shouting, "Who did this?" Jimmy and I were standing there, and I knocked out the first one who ran out. "Anyone else want to bother my niece?" Jimmy asked, and they all went back inside into the bar quickly. "I thought you cut his throat with that knife," I told Jimmy. "I meant to," he said. "The truth is, he was just lucky I held it wrong." We found out later on that it had been another girl, not Jimmy's niece, who had been slapped, but I didn't feel bad about it. If I had shown Jimmy that I would do whatever he asked me to do, and besides, the kid still deserved to be beaten up for beating up a girl. A couple of days later in the car, Jimmy gave me $1,000. "It's for you," he said as he handed me the cash. That was pretty big money for a young kid. It was all pretty amazing. Here was Jim Bulger giving me money. It felt good getting all this cash, real good. From then on, I spent more time with him. I knew, of course, that my life had changed, but I could handle that. I never felt the need to talk to anyone about what I was doing. I certainly never talked to Pam or any woman about anything that would involve criminal activity. As the years went on, Pam might have surmised what I was doing, but I never put a loved one in jeopardy by discussing the matters. Whoa, halfway into it, eh? 30 minutes, 31 minutes. As I've stated before, it's not exactly easy reading aloud. You kind of stumble over your words a little, and I know I'll get better at it. Like, it's, oh, yeah, I don't know what the heck that is. What is that? Some kind of bot thing, it looks like. Okay, so still no one here. How am I gonna grow my channel and no one here watching me? My girl River there. We got nailed with snow last night, man, like big time. I don't know. We're supposed to have a dinner tonight, but I don't know if we're even having it. So I see all these messages, people going on and on and on about it. So I don't know what it is. Okay, so it looks like my Christmas dinner is canceled, which frankly is fine because it really is crappy out, man. Like the mountains socked right in. Okay, then I'm gonna bash on with this and try to get some pages behind me. I had learned early that once a crime was committed, you never talked about it. There was never any reason to. If someone ever got in the car with us or came over to talk to us at a bar about something we had done, we would immediately suspect that he was wired and trying to get us to talk about a crime. But back then, I was getting busier with my own family. Our first son, Kevin Barry, was born at St. Margaret's Hospital on December 12th, 1982. 3.5 years after that, Brian Michael was born on May 2nd, 1986. After growing up with 6 sisters, it was something for Pam to get used to handling boys. But she did a fantastic job and raised 2 terrific sons. I was excited with each birth and cut the umbilical cord both times. So grateful to have 2 beautiful sons. Girls, I was certain would have given me more to worry about. But by the time the boys were born, I was working for Jimmy full time, and it was often hard to find time for my kids. I wish I had found more. See, I burned my finger there the other day on the wood stove, putting the log in. Okay, so but there were some real funny times during those years. When Kevin Barry was born, I asked Kevin O'Neill if he would be the godfather. He agreed, but when Jimmy said he wanted the honor, I said, no problem, and told Kevin he'd have to wait until the next kid. The baptism was held at St. Augustine's in South Boston when Kevin was a couple of months old. Pam and I were at the altar with her sister Sue, who was the baby's godmother, while Jimmy held Kevin. The priest asked Jimmy, will you watch out for this child's spiritual well-being? Jimmy kind of smiled and said, yes, I will. There were other families there that day whose kids were being baptized, and they all knew who Jimmy was. So everyone in the church started laughing, except for the priest, who had no idea who Jimmy was or what was going on. Pam and I were first living in our first floor apartment at 178 L Street at the same time, and our family and close friends came back to our place for a celebration after the ceremony. In 1983, I bought a nice one-family house in the suburbs with the help of some friends in construction. I fixed it up and put in a jacuzzi, a sauna, and a weight room. When Kevin was maybe 6 years old, he fell down while he was outside playing. His whole face got scraped up, his nose, his lip, his forehead. When he came in the house, Pam began to clean him up. She stopped for a minute and looked up at me and saw that my eyes had teared up, and she shook her head again. But I couldn't help it. It really bothered me to see him like that. All I wanted was to take the pain away from him. For both my boys. Whenever they got sick, it was devastating. I had so many scars all over my face, all over my body, but my kids were different. Sure, I was a criminal and I fought all the time, but my kids were young and I wanted to protect them from any pain. I also knew that I didn't want them to be any part of the criminal life. As the boys grew up, I made it to as many of their baseball, basketball, and football games as I could. Most night I got home for dinner, and then after the boys were asleep, I'd headed back out after 9 to spend the rest of the night driving around doing business with Jimmy. I brought in good money then and made sure the three of them had pretty much everything they needed. I did take my boys to Disney World when they were 9 and 6, and we had a great time. We should have taken more trips like that. My brother Jack and I had a place in North Conway, New Hampshire, where we would all go skiing. Pam's family always had big get-togethers, at her father's or one of her sister's houses. As a result, the boys were closer with their cousins on Pam's side. To this day, neither of my boys has ever gotten into trouble. Jesus. Into trouble. They're great kids. That's because of how Pam raised them, as well as the environment. It also shows that they have chosen a better life than I did. I think it's just parenting too, obviously. If you had a parent that's beating the crap out of you all the time like that and boxing, and I guess there's like it's okay to do boxing and that, but like not to like slap your kid every 5 seconds and beat the shit out of him for nothing just because he might have done something and got away with it. Jimmy was generous to both my boys, giving them $1,000 saving bonds and cash for their birthdays and Christmas. But he had his own philosophy about children. If you're going to be a criminal, don't get married and have kids because everything you do affects them. If you have no responsibility and you get pinched, you just have to worry about yourself. But if you're the main support for your kids, it affects you and them emotionally as well as financially. He was right, and I experienced exactly what he said. But still, I never regretted having my boys. I couldn't be prouder of each of them. As I continued to spend more time with Jimmy than with my own family, he had his worries about me and my fights, always telling me what I was one punch away from jail. His biggest fear was that I would hit someone and kill them. That was never my intent, but once I got into a fight, I wanted to get it over with as quickly as possible, to hit my opponent hard and not end up rolling around in the street with them. There were a lot of tough kids out there, and I often had my hands full trying to leave no doubt as to what would happen to anyone who fought me. But not every fight I got into enhanced my reputation or involved tough guys. One night in the late 70s, a bunch of my friends and I went into Saints, a bar near Faneuil Hall. When we walked into the bar, nothing stood out to us as unusual or different, but the bartender, a woman, greeted us with, "Gentlemen, I can't refuse to serve you. Oh, gentlemen, I can't refuse to serve you, but I want to tell you that this is an establishment where women prefer the company of other women. I suggest you have a drink and move on." So like a gay bar, I guess. My friends and I looked around and for the first time noticed that the bar was filled with just women. Lots of them in leather jackets, holding each other, dancing with each other. I ordered a Michelob or a Miller, and so did most of my friends. But one guy who obviously did it on purpose to screw the bartender ordered a screwdriver. "I'm sorry, but we don't serve organic juice," she told him, because of Anita Bryant. My friend understood that she was referring to Bryant, a 1959 Miss America runner-up and spokesperson for Florida orange growers and her anti-gay crusade. "Hey, what are you?" She says, "Hey, what are you? A bunch of..." "Hey, what are you anyhow?" he yelled. "A bunch of lesbians?" He had barely spoken the words when they were on us, at least 125 hard-fighting women on 8 guys. Suddenly, it was a full-blown brawl, and we weren't winning. The women were going after us with chairs and beer bottles, glasses, everything. We were hitting them like they were guys, but they weren't backing down. They really wanted to hurt us. We ended up fighting our way out of there, laughing. Once we got outside, we finally once we ended up fighting our way out of there, laughing once we got outside, but feeling lucky that they hadn't killed us. But Yogi Cummings pretty nearly made Jimmy's fears that I was one punch away from jail come true. Yogi, who came from Andrew Square, was one of the tougher guys at Triple O's, around 5'10", stockily built, and strong as an ox. He was about 4 years older than me. One October night, Kevin O'Neill wouldn't let Yogi in the bar, and the two of them had words outside the bar as they continued their shouting match. Kevin punched Yogi in the mouth with a right hand. Yogi fell back and a step or two before going after Kevin. Immediately I went after Yogi, and before we knew what was happening, the two of us were having an old-fashioned fist fight in the street in front of the bar. It was a weekend night, and Triple O's was packed, as were the other two bars within 20 yards of Triple O's. It didn't take long for all three bars to empty, and a crowd of 150 people had gathered to watch the two of us. As Yogi and I squared off, I was getting the better of him, but he hit me some hard shots and staggered me a few times, keeping it a fair fight. As the fight went on, I kept knocking Yogi down, and he kept on getting up. At one point, I had hit him so much that he was bleeding from his nose and his mouth, and had cuts over both eyes. Every time I hit him, blood would fly from someplace on his face and splatter over the people watching us. But Yogi would not stop and kept coming straight at me. Once he caught me one shot in the throat, and I found myself unable to swallow for a few seconds. The guy could hit. Finally, when I knocked him down for the fourth time, I figured that was it. I couldn't believe it a few seconds later when he got back up and said, "Is that all you got?" That infuriated me so much that I started hitting him mercilessly. Again, he went down, and I said, "Fuck this." I got ready to end it for good and kicked him in the face. I'd had enough of this crap. Suddenly, out of the crowd, a voice shouted, "No!" I turned around, and it was Jimmy. "Fight him fair," he told me. "He deserves it." When I let Yogi up, people were yelling at me to stop it because he was bleeding so much. Still, the bastard wouldn't quit and went right after me. Finally, I hurt him bad. He went down, and that was the end of it. Or so I thought. A minute later, Yogi back up, totally exasperated. I went after him. Just before I hit him, Jimmy said, "That's enough," and stopped me. "You're going to kill him. Get out of here while you can walk, or still walk," he told Yogi, and Yogi walked away. He turned around to look at Jimmy, and he said, "Fuck you." Jimmy didn't hesitate. He grabbed a beer bottle and smashed it over Yogi's already battered head. That time, Yogi didn't say a word. He just slowly and painfully staggered away. I looked at Jimmy and said, "You told me not to kick him." "That was different," he said. "He made it personal." As I walked back into the bar, all I could think of was the old saying, "Do as I say, not as I do." Everybody else except for Yogi and his friends walked back into the bar. I cleaned up a bit, changed my shirt, and went back to work at the door. The next day, it was all over town that the Triple O's gang had beat up Yogi. He looked so bad that no one could believe one person could have done all that to him. A girl who worked as a waitress at Triple O's was at her bowling league when Yogi's friends started yelling everyone that the bouncers at Triple O's had jumped Yogi. It was a fair fight, the waitress told them. Just him and Kevin Weeks. When a couple of people from Andrew Square who had been there also told the truth about what happened the night before, Yogi's friends shut up. There was no doubt Yogi was a tough guy who wouldn't quit, and I knew if we fought again, I'd have to pack a lunch because I'd be there for a while, like fighting. A week later, Jimmy and I were at Leshmere's in Cambridge looking at TVs when we spotted Yogi. Here we go again, I said to Jimmy, but Yogi walked up to me and stuck out his hand. His face was still swollen and discolored, and he had a child with him. When I shook his hand, he said, "Fair fight," and that was the end. The fight turned out to be one more thing to enhance my reputation at the door, but I was glad that Jimmy had stopped me from booting Yogi. If he hadn't screamed at me to stop, I would have hurt Yogi bad and probably been pinched for using a shod foot. I don't think so, man. He beat the living crap out of him. So, anyways, but that was far from the last time that Jimmy tried to tone down my punches. One summer night, Jimmy and I were driving from Castle Island on East Broadway past the South Boston Vietnam Memorial. As Jimmy took a right onto M Street, we found a car double parked in the middle of the street. Jimmy stopped and two of us were waiting while the kid in the double car park talked to someone leaning into the window. Jimmy strongly dislikes beeping horns because they draw the attention he shuns, but he gave his horn a light toot, which was a big deal for him. When the kid waved to him, Jimmy said, "Pull over. Go around me," the kid in the car said. "A cat," Jimmy said. "You've got the street blocked." When the kid ignored him, Jimmy touched the horn again, a little bit heavier than before. "Go around me," the kid repeated. "I'll go through you," Jimmy said. The kid gave him the finger and said, "Go fuck yourself." Jimmy got out of the car, and naturally I got out too. He went over to the driver's side of the car and started arguing with the kid to move his car. The kid gave him another finger, opened the door, and started coming toward Jimmy, swearing all the while. He was maybe 15, regular size, and probably in his early 20s. Oh, 5'10", sorry. Regular size and probably in his mid, and pretty damn stupid. Jimmy looked at me and said, "Kevin, hit him." I hit him a left jab in the mouth, and when the kid went down, I tossed him into the back seat of the car. His friend took one look at me and at the kid, and one look at me, and quickly moved the car out of the way and all the way down the street. I didn't think it had been a hard job, but the kid had gone down quickly. The next thing we knew, a bunch of his friends came running over from the park on M Street. When Jimmy and I turned around and started going after them, they all came to an abrupt stop and took off in the opposite direction. 54 minutes, guys. I'm going to go another 6 minutes or so. Hey, right on, man. I got a bot. My hot photo here, 69 XXX Life. Nice. Yeah, let's see that. Let's see your fake photos. Like fake women or whatever it is. An hour later, Jimmy and I pulled up to the Triple O's and found Kevin O'Neill outside. He told us that a motorcycle cop named Luongo had been down there looking for Whitey and Kevin. Kevin kidded him, insisting he must be looking for Whitey McGrail, a South Boston guy who owned a bar. The cop smiled at the joke, but told him they had just received word that Whitey and Kevin had hit this kid and knocked his teeth out. I just wanted to let them know that the cop had told Kevin. It turned out that the father of the kid, whose name was Frank Bolstead and who came from City Point, the more affluent section of South Boston from G Street down, was a Capitol cop who guarded the State House, and his mother was a crossing guard. His folks were all upset and knew it was Jimmy and me who had done this to their kid. Someone reached out to Jimmy, and he ended up paying $1,600 for the kid's dental work, which included a bridge for his missing front teeth. Later, Jimmy said to me, "Why did you hit the kid so hard?" "You told me to hit him," I said. "Yeah, well, I didn't tell you to hit him that hard," he answered. When I looked at him and said, "Now we're going to have a few degrees of hitting," he just started laughing. I still can't figure it out. It was just a jab, not a powerful punch. Maybe the teeth were loose to begin with. But there were fights when I didn't use my fists, like the one involving Chuck Devine's Chuck Devin's brother, Franny. Chucka, who was a little older than me, around 6 feet tall and a heavy set at 280 pounds with brown hair, was always easygoing, laughing and enjoying himself. He worked at the door at Triple O's with me. One night when I was standing at the door, he got a phone call. "Is he all right?" He kept hearing him yell into the phone. "Is he all right?" When he came walking over to me, I could see he was visibly shaken. "Chucka, what's the matter?" I asked him. "They just stabbed my brother Franny," he said, his eyes filling up. "Who stabbed your brother?" "These guys in Dorchester," he said. "I know where they all are, where they are. I'm going over." "I'll go with you," I said. The two of us went outside, and I hopped into his car with him. Larry Bavis, a regular down at the bar who played on Triple O's softball team, jumped in the back of his own accord, and the three of us drove over to Dorchester, which was about 3 miles from Triple O's. When we got to the park where the kids were, the three of us got out of the car and walked over to the bunch of Franny's friends who were still there. As soon as they saw us, 3 other guys in their mid-20s started walking away. We didn't pay any attention to those guys until one of Franny's friends said, "Chucka, those were the guys who went after Franny." As we approached them, they turned around with their backs against the fence. When I put my hands up to fight one kid, he broke the beer bottle he was holding against the fence. All he had at that point was the neck of the bottle, which was of no use to him. I looked at him and laughed. "Come on, motherfucker," I said. And with that, he whipped out a knife with a 5 or 6 inch long blade. He looked at me and said, Now fuck you, you come on." I started backing away and had my hands up. "Hey, take it easy," I told him. When I had backed up about 4 or 5 feet away from him, I reached inside my pocket, pulled out a pistol from my belt, and shot him in the leg. All of a sudden, all hell broke loose. and everyone started yelling. The kid I shot was on the ground. People were yelling. People were yelling, and I was in the middle of the street as his car came flying around the corner, heading straight at me. I dove over the hood of the car, but it sideswiped two other cars trying to hit me. Then I turned on the car and shot out its back window. The car kept on going, and the kid I shot in the leg went limping down the street. Chukka, who had no idea who was shooting, jumped down behind a car. I pulled him up and went to his car, pushed him in, and got in the driver's seat as Larry headed into the back. With the lights off so no one could get the plate number, I backed the car up and took off. We drove along Carson Beach to L Street, onto First Street, and headed to Triple O's. When we got there, I parked the car and went inside. As it turned out, Franny had gotten slashed with a straight razor, not with a knife, and had gone over to the hospital to get stitches. A week later, the kid I had shot got out of the hospital and went down to Devin's family's house and apologized. He said he and his friends didn't want any more trouble, and the next night I saw Chukka down in the bar. He was telling me how no one wanted any more trouble with Devin's brothers. The kids must have thought I was one of Franny's brothers. That wasn't the first time shooting a gun. I'd had guns since I was 18. My license to carry a weapon for protection of life and property was issued from the Boston Police Headquarters in 1978. I lost it 9 times later in 87. It wasn't hard to get the permit itself. I went down to the range to qualify and ended up getting a 298 out of 300. I had great eyesight, 20/10 vision, and was a great shot. I got it because at the time I was carrying receipts and money when I closed up Triple O's. Also, I was around Jimmy, so it was advantageous for me and for him that I had a permit to carry a firearm. Since he was a convicted felon, he couldn't legally carry a gun. Most of the time I carried 245s or 238s in a shoulder holster underneath my jacket or on my waist. It was very difficult to buy guns. I'd get them from gun stores or private people. I didn't like being around people, so I didn't shoot at ranges. Instead, once or twice a month, I would go to Carver, where a lady I knew owned a cranberry bog, and shoot on her property. There were sand pits there, and would put down cantaloupes and targets and shoot at them. Jimmy went down to the bogs a few times with me, and we shot a variety of weapons from assault weapons all the way down to pistols. When I shot that kid, I didn't feel anything. It just happened. He was trying to stab me, so I shot him. It was simple. But there was rarely a night at Triple O's when I wouldn't break up a fight or two at the bar. One fight turned out to be particularly important, and it wasn't even one I fought. One St. Patrick's Day in '76, during a big fight outside, someone stabbed a biker and handed me the knife. When I walked into the bar to get rid of the knife, Kevin O'Neill logically assumed I was the one who had just stabbed the biker. Afraid he would lose his license, he come down on me, riding me for hurting the bar with that kind of violence. Now that there wasn't plenty of violence. Not that there wasn't plenty of violence every night in that bar, but stabbings didn't usually happen more than twice a year and were worse than usual stuff. For weeks afterwards, Kevin would ride me about that incident, still angry about me jeopardizing the bar with the stabbing. That's my license you were fooling around with, he kept telling me. You should have thought about losing my license for that stabbing. I never responded much, just shrugged and went about my business. One night when Jimmy was there and Kevin was going at me yet again about the fight, Billy O'Connell went up to his brother and said, "Hey, he didn't do it. I did it. So lay off him." Jimmy turned to Kevin and said, "He kept his mouth shut and didn't tell on your brother. What do you think of that?" Kevin looked confused. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally asked. "I wasn't going to tell you your brother did it. I told him." "Yeah, I wasn't going to tell you your brother did it. I told him." Kevin just walked away, shaking his head. From then on, however, I could see that Jimmy was taking a bigger interest in me, talking more to me and watching me more intently, noticing everything I did or said the nights he was there. Okay, so that's it. That's that's an hour and 6 minutes today. We're on page 48 now. Pretty interesting book. What a life, eh? That guy's quite a tough guy, obviously. I'm going to delete this bot. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so yeah, we had no one join us today, which that kind of sucks, but that's okay. We're really putting a dent in our book here and getting through it. I can't wait till we get to the pictures. Maybe I'll do a video just of the pictures with a little narrative on it. And so yeah, that was an hour, just over an hour, 6 minutes today, reading the book Brutal, Kevin Weeks' life inside the Whitey Bulger's Irish Mafia. Yeah, we only know this Whitey Bulger guy from like the movies we've seen and the video. You know, I watch all these shows on it, and it's interesting. You know, like these guys. I don't know why we're so. I guess it's because it's so evil and bad or whatever. It's like stuff we'd never do, but we have a great fascination with it. Organized crime. Anyways, that's my video today. I hope you watch it in the restream. I don't know. Or not. I don't give a shit. I'm reading my book. I'm out.